Hi, this is Eric from longboxreview.com. Welcome to the show and welcome to a long-anticipated return show. We were supposed to do this show last year, but life got in the way. But here we are back for 2022. It is the Christmas Gab Bag episode with my good friend George from Meanwhile at the Podcast. Hey, George, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you too, Eric. How you doing?
Well, much better now this year as compared to last year at this time. I'm very pleased that you decided to come back a year later and do this Gab Bag.
Well, thank you. Me too. I've been looking forward to it since basically January 1st of this year.
So yeah, this is our for people who may not know, since we had a skip year. I wish, like many things, I could say, thanks a lot, COVID. But unfortunately, it wasn't that. It was some other thing that I'm not going to talk about here. But this is our fifth Gab Bag. It would have been our sixth had we done this last year, because we had our first one in 2017, and then we've been doing it every year since then.
Yeah, I look forward to it every year.
Yeah. And so what is the Christmas Gab Bag? Some people might be asking, George. That's just where George and I get together and talk about Christmas comics or Christmas-related comics, as the case may be. George tends to surprise me a little bit and bring up some really interesting comic books that have some connection to Christmas in some fashion. So I'm very curious. George has already told me what these comics are, but I don't think I know them. I've not read these, I don't think. I'm going from memory here, George. So you have to forgive me if I actually come back later and say, "Oh yeah, that one. I've read that one." But we're going to talk about a few. I'll say I'm not sure exactly how many or how much or how deep we're going to get into these particular issues. I know one of the comics of mine that we'll get to here in a bit. There are 5 different stories, short stories in it, but I'm not going to talk about all 5. I'll just mention them real briefly, but I'm going to focus on just a couple. So I don't know what's going on with what George is going to talk about. So think of this episode as kind of like a Christmas gift. It's all packaged nice and neat under the Christmas tree, the shiny paper and the wonderful bow and whatnot. And you go to open it, and who knows? What could it be?
It's like a Christmas stocking. And you're just digging deep and deep in, hoping that there's just that one more little gift at the bottom. And folks, I hope you didn't read the show notes already, because now it's like opening your Christmas present.
That's true.
You found them in mom's closet. So don't do that. We're going to surprise you here with all the fun stuff we're going to talk about today.
Well, George, I guess with the preamble out of the way, shall we get into some Christmas gab bagging? Yes,
I believe we should.
All right. Shall we? Let's just dive right in. What is your first Christmas comic? I guess we should have talked about this before we started recording. Huh?
Hey, listen, it's like we're sitting in front of the tree and we're trying to decide who's going to hand out the gifts. It all happens organically.
That's right.
All right. So as you can hear, I'm taking it out of the bag and board. I'm opening my present, if you can hear that. All right.
George, wait. So while you're doing that, are you one of those kind of gift openers that very meticulously unfolds the paper and takes the edge where it's taped and make sure that the paper doesn't get ripped, and you take the tape off and all that stuff and you unfold the paper so that you can use it again?
No, I am not one of those people, and I think those people definitely need help. Although I shouldn't say that, because I think my co-host Kristen opens her gifts that way, and I don't think Kristen needs any sort of help. So I guess, different strokes, different folks. You take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and there you have the facts of life. And now I'm going off on a weird sitcom tangent as opposed to a Christmas tangent. So let me bring it back in.
Oh, wait. So one more tangent, George, because
Sure.
I neglected to have you inform the listeners. We've already talked all about the Christmas Gab Bag and the history and blah, 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 blah. But they don't want to hear about that.
That's why we're here.
They want to hear about you and the show that you co-host with Kristen and some others, the Meanwhile at the Podcast. Oh, yes. So why don't you just tell them real quick what that is all about and where they can find you?
Thank you, Eric. I will definitely do that. That is a Christmas present to me to let other people know about us, because nobody knows about us. My name is George. I am one of 4 co-hosts of Meanwhile at the Podcast. We are a weekly show, and kind of like Eric, who has so many different imprints. It could be a comic show one week for Eric, and then another week it could be the Gutters, and then he could surprise us with Center Seat. Our show talks about, we talk about everything. We're like a radio show. I like to think of us as a radio show. And when you tune into our show, sure, you have an idea of what we're going to talk about. We're probably going to talk about things we've watched and books and comics we've read, music we've listened to, things that have happened in our lives. But you never quite know which way a conversation is going to go. And it's in and of itself, it is a gab bag every week. It's a grab bag of gab bags. We drop our episodes every Saturday morning. So please check us out on your podcast apps. If you haven't, subscribe, sample our show. And just to let you know, I am a very obsessive compulsive person. And just because Eric could not do the gab bag last year, I did the gab bag by myself, my first solo show, Eric. You didn't give me my report card grade on that. Then my first solo
A+
episode.
George.
No, thank you. So there is a gab bag from last year in our feed if you want to check that out in our archives, if you're looking for more Christmas-related content. Oh, and even though there's a crazed billionaire that owns Twitter right now for the moment, the best way to get us on social media is at Meanwhile ATP on Twitter, although we are at Meanwhile ATP on Instagram and Meanwhile the Podcast on Facebook, although we don't really use those platforms that much right now. But maybe in 2023, we will be diving back into those platforms. And I know my co-host Rodney, I didn't even mention my co-hosts, Rodney, Kristen, and Rich. I know Rodney is going on to, I think, Hive right now. You'll hear all about it on our show if you check us out. Rodney is a graphic artist that goes by the name Art Nerd with 2 R's in the word nerd. And Kristen and Rich are a married couple that used to be part owners of a comic book store. Right now they are not part owners of that store, but they have a heavy background in comics, which helps for our comic conversations.
All right. Thank you, George. All righty. So back to Christmas comics.
Yes. And if you do recall, I went off on a sitcom tangent before you reminded me that I should talk about my show.
Okay. Yes.
I gave the Different Strokes theme a little bit, the Facts of Life
That's
theme.
right. Mm-hmm.
Well, there might have been a reason for that. And to be honest with you, that was serendipitous because there really wasn't a reason for that. But I noticed that, wow, it fits in with my first book. Because my first book is the Supersized Alf Holiday Special, number 2. Now, far be it for me to bring number 1 to the table. I'm bringing number 2 to the table. And this is, I don't know, can you see that cover? I know your listeners can't see this, but it is Alf, the famous alien life form from the planet Melmac. He is on a sleigh with a bunch of other Melmacians that appear in this book. And if you can see, Eric, you might see some ex-Melmen. I don't know what they're called. I'll have to look at my notes. But you might see person from Melmac that looks like Colossus, perhaps one that looks like Rogue, perhaps one that looks like Groucho Marx.
Mm-hmm.
There are all sorts of Melmac residents who look like some of our pop culture icons. And one of the themes for the books that I have this year is A, pop culture references, which kind of falls in tune to my show.
Exactly.
And B, one of the things you alluded to when you introduced what we were doing here with the Gab Bag, my track record of bringing books to the table that by accident aren't always holiday themed. Now, trust me.
Yes.
Listen, I got burned by Fantastic Four volume 2, number 4, with the Christmas cover, and it had nothing to do with Christmas. I got burned that year.
Right.
We both got burned. It had nothing to do with John Byrne, just to let everybody know. All these books that I'll be talking about today do have holiday stories in them, but of course they have to throw in something non-holiday, which I don't know how I feel about that. If you're going to have a Christmas cover, especially something that says holiday special on it, every story should have to do with the holidays, a December holiday.
Yeah.
this is why I think next year, Eric, when we do this, it's all going to be Archie comics, like Benny and Veronica's Stocking Stuffer,
Yeah.
Archie's Christmas Grab Bag, because every story is holiday related.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's going to be all Archie all the time next year. But anyway, here we have the Alf Holiday Special. Now, if I get my notes over here, because I'm not going to go page by page in here, but let's just talk about the pedigree here. This is from winter 1990. And on my show, I've mentioned this before. One of the things that I think is missing in comics today are good humor comics, and not the good humor ice cream. I'm talking fun, humorous comics that we can all just sit back and laugh at. And here's a guy, me in my mid-50s, reading a book that was probably from the Star line of Marvel Comics back in the 90s. Things like Heathcliff were coming out from this. What else did they have? Ewoks, Care Bears, things like that.
Oh, yeah.
And here, these are the things I'm longing for. I don't know why, but they're simple. But I'm telling you, I enjoyed this book immensely. It was making me laugh. And what I'd like to do is I will focus on the holiday-themed stories in here. Now, were you aware of the Alf holiday specials? Like I said, this is number 2. So the first one had come out the previous winter.
No, I knew there was a comic book starring Alf, but I did not realize that there were holiday specials.
And I think that's another thing that we're missing. Comics that are licensed from television shows, which I know is hard to do these days since we have all the streaming services, and it's not that we have only 3 or 4 networks with TV shows that everybody can watch at the same time. So we're all guaranteed to know every show. Like, even if you didn't watch Alf back in the day, you knew Alf existed. There was no way you could avoid Alf and merchandise in the stores. The same thing with back when Dell Comics or Gold Key Comics would have Star Trek or something like Gunsmoke, Adam 12. Even if those comics were very short-lived, there's something about having a TV-themed comic.
Mm-hmm.
And I miss that in today's world. So it was very refreshing to pick this up after almost 30 years.
Wow.
And reread this book. Let's get into it. All right, so for those of you who don't know, Alf was a TV show that ran for 4 seasons from 1986 to 1990. I love this show, and whenever I read this comic, I really don't remember too much about any of the characters except for Alf himself and Willie Tanner, the patriarch of the household where Alf lives.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever they spoke in the book, I heard their voices, the actors' voices in my head. Which do you do that when you read like a Star Trek comic?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Alf's voice to me is iconic. If you've ever watched Alf before, there's no way I'm going to try and imitate him. But if you know Alf's voice, if you read this comic, reading it in his voice with the jokes that they put in here adds that little extra flavor of fun to hear it in Alf's voice. The first story, luckily it opens with a holiday story, is Don't Toy With Me. And the premise is pretty simple. Alf and Willie are going to go Christmas shopping. Willie parks the car far away from the mall because he can't find a parking space. And kids, if you don't know what a mall is a brick and mortar store where people would go shopping prior to us shopping on the internet, just to let everybody know what a mall is. Willie leaves Alf in the car because Alf is an alien life form and he would be recognized immediately as a furry orange alien. Alf stays in the car, Willie goes shopping, and of course, somebody steals the car. Willie had left the keys in the car so Alf could listen to the radio, and a guy comes over, breaks into the car, goes, "Oh, great, there are keys in the car, this is easy." And he drives off, and Alf acts like a stuffed animal. Coincidentally enough, Alf had been flossing his teeth while Willie was driving to the mall, so Al used the dental floss to make it look like it was a pull string. You know how they have on dolls so that the doll will talk? So he used that as a pull string to make it sound like he was going to talk, and he was talking in rhyme, which reminded me of the Demon from DC Comics. Oh, and by the way, this is from Marvel Comics Star line. I don't think I mentioned that. So Alf tries to convince the car thief to change his ways. And somehow he finds out in the conversation that he has as the doll with the person in the car that the guy has issues with his family, and he has been shunned by his family because of his way of life, his life of crime. And because it's the holidays, he starts remembering times with his mom, and he goes to a payphone, calls his mom and says, "Mom, I'm ready to change my life. Can I come home now?" And of course she says yes. He forgets about the car. Alf starts the car, drives it back to the mall, and he goes, "Just in time. Willie's coming back." And Willie gets in the car, and of course he notices the car's out of gas. So anyway, that's the premise of that story there. So a nice, fun holiday story. But I'd like to throw at you some of the pop culture references and some of the things that the writer did that just put this one over the top for me, that it's more than what I just said. So I'll let you know, this is written by Michael Gallagher, and the penciler is Dave Manek. I think they did most of the work in this book, but the name that stuck out to me was the inker of this particular story, and this is the only one she inked, was Marie Severin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea she did Alf comics.
I know, who would have known, right? But I do want to throw some of the fun pop culture references in here to you. So just to date it, whenever Alf makes references to pop culture icons, he usually throws in Mel. So it's like a Mel Mackian, something like that. So like Jack Mella Lane. To say it out loud is kind of hard. So instead of Jack LaLanne, and I don't even know if half our listeners know who Jack LaLanne was, right? Yeah. And and this part, I don't remember if he did this in the show, but in the comic, throughout the comic, he made different exclamations of Great Caesar's ghost. So in this particular story, he said, "Great Caesar's Coast deodorant soap," which is a real deodorant soap, by the way, folks. and throughout the comic, he would say different things, like, I don't know, maybe he said, "Great Caesar's Ghostbusters 2," or something like that. Just things like that he would throw out there that were at the time, they were popular at the time, but now that you're reading it 30 years later, some people may not know what these references are. In fact, I even wonder if some of them went over my head, because they came fast and furious.
Well, I just think it's funny that he uses Great Caesar's ghost, which is, Perry White's saying from Superman, right?
Yep, and there are some DC references in here, by the way, and I'm going to throw them out at you as they come along. On the fourth page, there's the first editor's note and meta reference that happens throughout the book, which I didn't expect. He's in the car and he's thinking to himself, "Holy cremola, this guy thinks I'm a toy. Say, I did masquerade as a toy back in the issue Kate referred to. What was my name?" So earlier in the story, Kate, the mom of the story, makes a reference to something Alf did in the past. She says, "Now, Willie, we don't want another alien-related incident like last year." And then there's an editorial note, "Alf Holiday Special #1, which you could expect from comics from back in that time, those editor's notes, right?
Mm-hmm. I love those.
But here, Alf makes a reference to the editor's note by saying, "The issue Kate referred to. What was my name?" And in the editor's note, it says Fuzzy Phillip. So in the next panel, Alf goes, "Oh, yeah, thanks, Ed," because it says, instead of editor, it says Ed. And things like that happen throughout the comic where there are references to the caption boxes, which is a lot of fun. And, if you were a kid back then, I mean, stuff like that's kind of cool. That's all there really is about this particular holiday story. Although I will, when you and I have the actual issue in front of us instead of a collected edition, we like to point out the ads. So there was an ad in the middle of this story for action figures from Star Trek V, The Final Frontier.
Ooh.
They were collector's figures from the San Francisco Mint. Now, when I see things like this, I'm always wondering, did anybody order this?
Yeah.
I'd love to know somebody who ordered this, because I don't think I've ever seen anything like this at a convention or anything like that. There was Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, Bones, Cybok, and Claw. And you could order them separately, or you can order a set of 5 and get a free poster. And each one of them had a little diorama that you could pose the figure in. I love stuff like that when you're reading the original issues.
Yeah. And in fact, I was just thumbing through, since you mentioned that, I was just thumbing through the issue I'm going to talk about next. And it's got similar ads like that where I was like, do people actually order these things?
I know. I love that.
Because I didn't know anybody who ordered any of them, but I would have, if I would have had the money back then, I would have.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. I would have definitely been one of those people that cut the thing out of the comic and send my money in.
Well, George, that's crazy talk. That's a bridge too far for me.
Well, back then,
then,
I may not have had any access to a photocopier or anything like that. But let's move on to Have Yourself a Melly Little Christmas. So that's the 4th story here. This one actually features Santa. And the problem here is Santa appears to Alf and says that his reindeer have been quarantined due to a big Lyme disease epidemic that was going on. And since deer carry ticks, which carry Lyme disease, he was being shut down by the health department because he couldn't let the deer go out in case they were infected with Lyme disease. So he needed Alf to take up his role from, again, another previous Alf issue as the superhero, the Fantastic Fur. He has an anti-gravity belt that I guess he has from the Planet Melmac, and I'm not sure if he used that in the show. Maybe that's something he used in the show or just in the comics. He dons the kitchen tablecloth, and he can fly using his anti-gravity belt. So Alf is reluctant to do it, but then Santa says, he'll wipe out some of the things Alf did during the year to take him off the naughty list and put him on the list. All things are forgiven. And Alf's like, it's a deal. But Alf can't figure out how Santa got to Alf's house if all the reindeer are quarantined. Get this one, Eric. Donald Trump sent me a free round trip on his executive helicopter. And there's a helicopter with a T on it with the kind of like that gold embossment around. Then Alf asks, but Santa, you can't accept a bribe. Now get this, 1990. Okay, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Winter 1990. I prefer to call it a campaign contribution. Ho, ho, home, James. Yeah, so I think when Gorman, the barbecue-barian, went time traveling to the Mel Marx brothers' offices, maybe they also time traveled to the 20 teens and the 2020s and went back and wrote this comic.
Oh boy. That's a little too close for comfort there, George.
Mm-hmm. There's one more reference in here where, and this reference actually is way obscure, I think, for 1990. Alf falls and hits his head, and he says, "I'm dizzier than Goldie Hawn in her laugh-in days." Now that's a reference in 1990. Because I know Laugh-In was in syndication for a little while, but I don't think they were in syndication in the late 80s. I seem to recall watching them in syndication like when I was in high school. So I don't really think, I think they got bumped off for more current things in syndication. So I think the Laugh-In reference was really for the parents.
Oh yeah.
Rather than a kid reading this book. But in the end, they deliver all the presents, and their jokes abound. Hijinks ensue, as our friend Brian Loy from the Alamo Draft House always says. And when Alf wakes up, he thinks it was all a dream. But of course, there's a present under the tree from Santa, and it says, "To Gordon from your Uncle Kris Kringle." So it was a thank you gift for being the Fantastic Fur to help him deliver all the gifts. But let's get to the last story in here. Alf in For Goodness Snakes. This is a New Year's story. They are ringing in 1990. In fact, let's see. What were the exact words here? Well, here's to health and happiness to one and all as we enter the 90s. Those were the days, right, Eric? Entering the 90s. Alf had brought a snake into the house for some convoluted reason that has to do with something that happens on Melmac every like 78 years because they were going into 1990 here on Earth. There was something about snakes that they would do on Melmac. He had a snake in the house, and of course everybody's like, you got to get that snake out of the house, Alf. Of course, the snake escapes, and the story is all about them trying to find the snake. Now, remember earlier on I told you that the mom was the disciplinarian. She was the strict one in the house. Well, she was very, very mad at Alf, and she was giving him you have 10 minutes to get that snake out of the house, or else, instead of us bopping the snake with a bat, we're bopping you with a bat, or whatever the consequences were. She gets him in the kitchen and she says, Alf, over the years, I've endured many things. Reduceroni, personality swap, eat off the floor day, influenza. So instead of influenza, it was influenza. Rapunzel rinse, clogged veins, but this is the last straw. After each of these references, there are different marks, asterisks, period, and exclamation point. And there's an editor's note at the bottom indicating which issues of Alf all of these things occur. Alf turns to us, the reader, and says, wow, that might be a new world's record for back issue plugging.
Yeah.
Of course, they get rid of the snake, and they bring in 1990, and then Alf says, well, let's be prepared next year for something that has to do with elephants. So that's something to look forward to if there's ever an Alf holiday special number 3. But that is the supersized Alf holiday special. 3 out of 6 stories in it are holiday related, and it's not quite the Meatloaf song I like to quote, but hey, 3 out of 6 ain't bad.
Well, George, I don't know how I can even follow that because my first pick of the episode is a little more, I'll just say mainstream.
Wait, Alf's not mainstream? Come on, man. Alf probably, it was mainstream for that very brief period of time.
That's true. Very true. Well, my holiday, my Christmas comics tend to be more on the DC side, usually, because that's more of what I read back in the day. Stuff that I was more interested in. And this is no different because this is, I'll show George here on the video, but this is DC Special Series number 21. Can you see that, George?
Yes. Ooh, I remember that issue.
Yeah. The Superstar Holiday Special from the cover date 1980, but it was published on December 6th, 1979. And I'll just show you that real quick, George, on the back cover.
Another Star Trek reference.
Star Trek the Motion Picture, now playing at a theater near you, which, of course, it was, well, the next day that this comic came out, because December 7th, 1979, is when the motion picture debuted.
Okay, I'm out. I'm running to the theater right now.
Well, I certainly did. Anyway, so this is I think this is one of those kind of iconic covers from DC Comics past, right? Because you've got this is by Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, and you've got the members of the Legion of Superheroes, Jonah Hex, Sergeant Rock, Batman, and various people from the House of Mystery or their mystic titles at that time, all heading towards a star shining bright in the night in the distance. And so what we got here is a one of those wonderful dollar comics, 5 all new stories featuring those characters. And so let me just read this opening page for you to give you a sense
they
of
were
it.
All new stories? None of them were reprints?
No, as far as I know, these are all new. Yeah.
Oh, cool. So kind of the way they do it today, where the ones today are 80 pages with 10 stories or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they're usually all new. I didn't realize this one was all new. Cool.
But before I get to that, actually, this is one of those Christmas specials in my collection that I was happy to find. This is not something that I purchased back in December of 1979 because my money was being spent at the movie theater to watch Star Trek: The Motion Picture later that month. But I found this. I'm sure I paid, I don't know, $1 or $2 for this issue at probably Emerald City Comic Con, probably in 2016.
Oh, you only really relatively recently acquired it.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I remember seeing this in either ads or maybe even in a spinner rack at some grocery store back then. But it was $1, and comics back then, normal price comics back then were 35 cents when I was reading them. So, $1, that's 3 times the price, and I could buy 3 comics for that. So anyway, so but I got that, and one of the things I love about reading these comics like this is that it was published around the same time that I started getting into comics. The very late 70s, early 80s. So I really enjoy visiting that time period. And although this is like I said, Christmas themed. So here's the opening page of this. The midnight sky is an infinite tapestry woven with pinpoint patterns of stars that shine in eternal profusion. I just the overwrought language is just lovely. But there is one star that shines more brightly than the rest. On a wintry night almost 2,000 years ago, 3 wise and weary kings of ancient lands followed that brightly shining star to a sheltered stable in the village of Bethlehem, and the world would never again be the same. On that self-same night in centuries since, the star is shone again over war-torn Italy, over the snow-swept Colorados, over bustling Gotham City, over a ramshackle Kentucky mansion, and over a world that is yet to be. The star has made its presence felt. Come along now with the world's greatest heroes, although that's kind of stretching it with some of these characters, to follow that star, and your world, too, may never again be the same. So, maybe overdoing it just a little bit.
I was just about to say, I miss stuff like that. More of that, please. More of that, please.
Yeah. I admit, I too am like, it's like, oh, that's, I remember reading comics like that, written like this, but maybe a little just overdone. All right. So like I said, 5 all new stories in here, and just like a star has 5 points, we get these 5 stories involving a star. So, like I said, near the top of the show, there are 5 stories here, but I'm only going to talk in depth about 2 of them. But real quick, the Jonah Hex story is the one that opens it up. This is where a star allows Jonah Hex to find some bad guys, and then he blows them up. So, traditional Christmas fare.
Yeah, that's right up there. Yeah. Isn't that the similar theme to Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer?
That's right. Speaking of, I guess, what's the term? Oh, vigilantism. That's what I'm looking.
Yeah.
The next story is Batman, in a story called Wanted Santa Claus Dead or Alive. So a star in the story, a quote unquote star, points the way for Batman to save a repentant mall Santa who's a former thief and trying to turn over a new leaf, who's about to be killed by some other gangster type people that are coercing him into helping them steal some stuff from, I think, a mall. Yeah, I did say mall. Repentant mall Santa. What's interesting about this, George, is that not the star, not Batman so much, but this is the first time that Frank Miller drew Batman for DC Comics in this issue.
Who would think these things, right?
His first work on Batman. Although to me, it kind of looks a little bit like, oh boy, I'm blanking. Oh, Marshall Rogers. That's who I'm thinking of.
Oh, okay.
And I think that might have to do more to do with the inker than anything else. But I meant to look that up to see if the inker also inked Marshall Rogers. I did not do that. But anyway, so like I said, Frank Miller's first work. So like I said, I paid maybe $1 or $2 for this issue. at the Comic-Con, George. I looked it up for a fine 6.0 copy of this issue.
Uh-huh.
How much do you think it's going for these days?
Well,
non-slabbed, of course.
Right. Seeing how this conversation is going, I'm tempted to say a nickel, but I will say $5.
Oh, 80.
$80.
$80.
Nice. Good. And I'm glad it is.
That's one website I looked at. So, prices fluctuate and all that stuff, but still a 6.0 copy for $80. And I got this, which is, it's probably good to find. It's, not too bad for a few bucks.
And the way you were looking at me and kind of the way you were wording that question, I was under the impression that you were going to tell the moral of the story was you overpaid. And I wouldn't think that you overpaid. And actually, to be honest with you, okay, $80 might be a little high, I guess, but you don't really, like, for instance, this year's square-bound 80-page or 100-page giant is called Grifter Got Run Over by a Reindeer. Mm-hmm. That's the holiday DC comic this year.
Right.
And I think I prefer to have that 5-story comic in your hand right there. I have the feeling I would get more enjoyment out of that than Grifter Got Run Over by a Reindeer.
Maybe. Once that gets onto the DC Universe Infinite app, I'll read that and I'll let you know. But
okay, thank you. Because I know I'm not reading it.
I have to say this Batman story was like, it was okay. It seemed like it was really trying hard to fit the whole star theme into it. So anyway, the next story in here, which is interesting.
Who wrote that?
Oh, this was written by Denny O'Neil.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and did you mention who wrote and drew the
I did
Jonah
not.
Hex?
No. So it was drawn by Dick Ayers and Romeo Tangle, and Michael Fleischer is the writer, with Gene D'Angelo as the colorist, and Shelley Lefferman as letterer. Which some of these names, like Shelley Lefferman, I'd never encountered that name before. At least not that I recall.
Yeah, most of those names, like in that Alf book, I wasn't surprised that I didn't know.
Yeah,
because I think a lot of those artists are probably maybe kids art. I don't know what I would. They probably weren't drawing too many superhero comics, also, or writing them. But Marie Severin's name popped out on that first one.
Yeah, and Steve Mitchell was the inker on that Batman story. Glynis Ween, colorist, and Ben Oda. Those are names I do know, except for Steve Mitchell.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but at the time, you wouldn't have known Frank Miller more than likely.
Oh no,
right? We wouldn't have known that name, would we have?
At that time, because no, I think he went to Daredevil after that. Because I think Denny O'Neil left DC shortly after that, and then he brought Frank Miller on, or at least gave Frank Miller the opportunity to do more writing on Daredevil.
I see.
So at least that's according to the stuff that I read.
Right, research that you actually did, as opposed to anything I did. Yeah.
Well, it's just like, oh, that's interesting. What's the story behind that? So then I start doing stuff. But that Jonah Hex story and the Batman story were 10 pages each. Yes, so 10 pages each. This next story, this is the one I wanted to focus on first out of the two in this 5-story anthology. This is the House of Mystery story, which is only 8 pages. Drawn by Romeo Tangle and Dan Adkins. So Romeo Tangle doing the frontman work, so to speak. Usually, he's known as an inker for example, for George Perez on New Teen Titans. That's how I know.
That's him.
Bob Rozakis was the writer. Bob Rozakis was the Answer Man, and we get an Answer Man entry at the end of this issue. So I'll get to that later. But
fun.
Bob LaRose, the colorist, and Shelley Lefferman letters. So, again, 2 names I don't really know. Anyway, so the House of Mystery entry, we got Cain and Abel, the 3 witches. From, what is the name of their comic?
It wasn't The Witching Hour, was it?
The Witching Hour, thank you. That's exactly it. They're Cynthia, Mildred, and Mordred. I had to look up.
I didn't know
some of their. Yeah, Mordred is mentioned by name in the story, but and maybe Cynthia, but I don't think Mildred was. Anyway. And Destiny all have gathered
DC had a Destiny character?
Yes.
And what did Destiny appear in some other horror book or something like that? Or was she like, is Destiny he or she? Is she?
No, it's the male version of the character. He's the one that's always holding the Book of Destiny.
Is that, they use him in Sandman?
Neil Gaiman took that character and added him into the dreaming, everything that he set up for the dreaming, and it made him one of the major concepts, along with dream and death and the others. So yeah,
All right.
I love that kind of that kind of stuff that some comic creators mine and develop from that. So anyway, all these characters have converged on the House of Mystery for Christmas.
Oh,
oddly enough, while they wait for Santa Claus to arrive, they tell each other stories to determine who is the best storyteller, which that makes a lot of sense, given especially Cain and Abel. They're always competing with each other. The witches tell of a family in a life raft who see a light from a distant lighthouse. But when they make it to shore, the lightkeeper tells them that the light has been out for a week. What? The daughter calls the light of the star they had been following the Christmas star. Cain then, I believe, he insults Mordred, basically saying that story sucks. And then he proceeds to tell the sad story of Mr. Podash, a pawnbroker who, quote, never missed the opportunity to out-haggle a customer. And then there's a little bit where he is basically taking advantage of this elderly woman who's trying to pawn some stuff so that she can afford to buy food to make Christmas dinner. And he wrings as much out of her as possible. Anyway, shortly after that, a man with a white beard appears in the store, offering Podash a large diamond, which actually, to me, doesn't look all that large in the story, but maybe for 1979, it was considered a very large diamond, in exchange for everything in Mr. Podash's shop. After some negotiation and some quick thinking on Mr. Podash's part, trying to get any angle that he can out of this deal, he reluctantly agrees, thinking his ship has come in, and he can retire now with the worth of whatever the worth of this diamond is, right? But then right after this white bearded man, who could that be, George, has taken possession of the shop's contents, Podash notices that where the diamond once was in the little case, now it's a lump of coal. The white bearded man then flies away in his sleigh with all of the stuff from the shop toward a brightly shining star in the sky, intending to give back to the people their possessions that Podash took from them and didn't pay nearly enough for. And he wishes Podash a Merry Christmas. Okay, so really light on the whole Christmas aspect, right? Destiny then decides, hey, I got the best story. Let me tell you. And I actually kind of like the story, even though it makes no sense whatsoever. But he tells his story about a pilot in the future, some future world, who thought that the Christmas star was a UFO and intended to prove his theory correct. So he takes this ship, the starship, and flies toward the light and is pushing the limits of the engines. So as the ship exceeds the speed of light, the ship breaks apart and explodes. And the explosion, as it says in the story, was seen across the ages. And you see in the panel the explosion start to transform. The light of the explosion starts to transform, going back into the past, into the Christmas star, seen by the three wise men. So then, after Destiny is done with his story, chaos breaks loose. Everybody's hitting each other and fighting and arguing. And then the Phantom Stranger arrives with Madame Xanadu.
This is a crossover event.
Right?
This is great.
In eight pages, George.
I was just going to say, just those three tales alone. I was going to ask you, how the heck did they do that in 8 pages? Now we have the Phantom Stranger and Madame Xanadu? Holy cow. This should have been the whole comic.
Right. And so this is where part of it kind of breaks down for me is like the Phantom Stranger. So was the Phantom Stranger invited to join them? And is Madame Xanadu his +1? Or did he just, because the Phantom Stranger just will appear wherever he's needed. Right. And so I think maybe that's what they were going for.
Somebody had to break the fight up?
Because he arrives to remind them that they have forgotten the meaning of the holiday. And to which I go, Cain and Abel know the meaning of the holiday? Anyway, so then Abel discovers gifts in the house. They're just suddenly there. And then they also then notice that the Phantom Stranger is gone. But not Madame Xanadu, because she's seen in the background of the last panel. So, and then Mordred is asking, did somebody just hear a ho, ho, ho?
So far, that's my favorite story. I'm glad you focused on that one.
It's like I said, I had to focus on this one because I just think it's cute that those horror adjacent hosts of their respective titles gather together to celebrate Christmas in their own weird way.
I do find it funny that based on your description of the Batman story with the star, you said they were fighting so much to put the star in there. And this story, each tale had something to do with the star. I forgot, did the Jonah Hex story have anything to do with the star?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, did I not say that? Oh, that was dumb of me.
No, you may have, but because you didn't focus on it so much, when he's off to find the bad guys, because he's a bounty hunter, right? There's a star in the distance that's shining that leads him to where they are. It just happenstance, but that's how they. And if I recall correctly, on the cover, aren't all the characters going toward a star?
Yes.
All right. So this is the star. The star is the theme basically for the entire book. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. See, it took me 3 stories to figure it out, but I'm there. Well, actually, it was really 5 stories when you think about it because of all the tales that everybody told. Yeah. But now I get it.
So the next tale is a Sergeant Rock tale, The Longest Night. That's also a 10-page story.
Boy, those horror characters got the short end of the stick. Plus, it seemed like they had the most content.
Exactly. Wow. This is by Dick Ayers and Romeo Tangle as the artist, Robert Kanigher as writer, of course, Sergeant Rock, Tatiana Wood as colorist, and Ben Oda. Letters on this. Basically, a star shows Sergeant Rock and Easy Company the way to their destination. They're headed for Santa Maria to rid the town of Nazis and then encounter some nuns and some Nazis, and, the good guys win in the end. So then we get to the last story, which is the second one I want to focus on. This is a 12-page story.
This is where the pages got stolen from the horror characters.
Right.
Yep.
And, and given who is involved in this one, maybe they threw their weight around just a little bit. But this is featuring Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. Starlight, Starbright, Farthest Star I See Tonight.
And you're not biased
of course not.
Have an extra 2 pages. Yeah, no, yeah.
This is by Jose Luis Garcia Lopez and Dick Giordano as artists.
Wow.
Paul Levitz as the writer, Adrian Roy, colorist, and Ben Oda does the letters on this.
I just need to know, you're going to take this segment, just this segment
and turn
right
it
here, into a Tales of the Legion Project podcast.
I'm sorry, George. I have to announce now to you and the listeners, this is the final Christmas Gab Bag, and next year will be a Tales of the Legion Christmas extravaganza. Actually, that might be kind of fun to do if I could find enough Legion Christmas stories. But okay. Yeah, I mean, especially, like I said, when I first started talking about this issues that were written or published about the same time I was getting into comics, right? And Legion was one of those early draws for me. And so I get to read this, this year, or actually it was last year when I read this, to prepare for our Gab Bag last year that didn't happen. When I read that, it was the first time I'd read this story. And so it was a new Legion story for me. So I really appreciated being able to do that. So anyway, Superboy in the story arrives in the 30th century, visiting the Legion, wanting an old-fashioned Christmas. Not sure why he can't just stay in 20th century Smallville and have an old-fashioned Christmas with Ma and Pa Kent, but, here we are. And in pursuit of that, he convinces some of the Legionnaires to go looking for the Christmas star. Apparently, they didn't know about that pilot from the Destiny story. But when they arrive, so he gets Phantom Girl, Lightning Lad, Saturn Girl, and Wildfire to go along with him. And they hop in a Legion cruiser. Lightning Lad apparently had no idea about this, but he's an ace pilot and CompuNav, I don't know what. Anyway, so he plugs in some numbers in the computer and off they go. But where the star is supposed to be, there is no star. But there is a planet, a nearby planet. And they determine that the planet's entering a new ice age, and the inhabitants are barely surviving right now. And so with Superboy convincing them, I'm not sure why he would need to do this, but convince the Legion to help out these three very different races on this planet. Phantom Girl notes that the United Planet's evacuation arcs wouldn't arrive in time. Not sure why. I mean, ice ages usually creep in over centuries, but whatever. But Superboy comes up with, because Superboy is the Kirk of the Legion, right? He always comes up with a really cool plan for surviving or reaching their objective, right? So Lightning Lad and Wildfire carve out a cave. Superboy arrives with members of each race, and he was able to do that because, I don't know how much you know about the Legion, but they used to have telepathic earplugs so that they could communicate with each other in space.
I did not know that, and I don't think you and Peter mentioned that. I guess they didn't do that in the Baxter run.
It's not something that they brought up very often, but he apparently used the telepathic earplugs to communicate to these three alien races. his plan.
So this was a thing. It wasn't just created for this story.
Oh, no,
this was a thing.
No,
okay.
I've read about the telepathic earplugs in other stories. So
okay.
So basically, the plan is each of the three races will use the cave as shelter and help each other until the evacuation arcs arrive. And so one race is growing their food to feed another race, and the other races, they're helping each other out to survive this cataclysmic event. And then later, so that the Legionnaires leave the planet. But as they're leaving, Superboy comments that Christmas is about caring and helping, and while they didn't find the star, he says to them, something brought us here this Christmas Eve, didn't it?
Mm.
And, as kind of schmaltzy and that sentiment is, I kind of like it.
I do too.
Friends coming together to help others, helping other people in times of need. That says Christmas to me. Probably more than those other things that I talked about in this issue. And again with the history lesson, George, there's a panel in here where they reference other Legionnaires and what they're doing at Christmas time.
Okay.
For example, Chameleon Boy, who's a Durlan, they don't observe Christmas because, they're an alien race.
Right.
And so he's just off patrolling somewhere in space.
I thought you were going to tell me he went to a Chinese restaurant.
Is that a Christmas Story reference, George?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe.
But they do show Colossal Boy, and they refer to him as observing Jewish traditions during the holiday. And I know Colossal Boy is Jewish based on my years of reading the Legion. But I thought, well, wait a minute. This is 1979 that this has come out. So was that the first time that they referenced Colossal Boy being Jewish? And so, as I said, history lesson, it was, as far as I could tell. And not only that, but it is one of the first times that a superhero character, either in DC or Marvel, was explicitly identified as being Jewish. Apparently, it was Kitty Pryde in X-Men just a few months earlier. So she kind of beat him out. But I thought that was interesting.
Now I know why this is an $80 comic. It's a key issue, right?
For that reason, yeah.
Well, that's what's driving up all the comic prices and comic art prices. This is a key issue in terms of Legion history.
Speaking of history and ads, George, since you had talked about yours. So
I love the ads.
Here is an ad on the inside cover for the Corgi superhero cars that mean great fun that fit in your pocket. Now, George,
did you have any of those?
No.
Okay, let me see that ad again.
I saw this ad so much in a lot of the comics that I read at that time. And
I could swear I had that Joker.
Really?
I believe so.
I so wanted the Supermobile.
Yeah, hold that up again. I know this is very good radio, right? Very good podcasting. I could swear I had the Batmobile, the Batcopter, and that Joker mobile. I don't think I had any of the other things, but they look so familiar.
Well, they look familiar to me only because of the ad, because I saw it so much, but I really wanted those. Another one in here, I was going to ask you, and this is another ad that I saw so many times in comics, and it's the Sea Monkeys.
Sea Monkeys.
Did you ever?
No. I always wondered what they really were.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I was like, what is this?
I actually, just a few years ago, I finally broke down and looked at, did a Google search to see if there are any images or videos of people who had actually ordered these things. And yes.
Right. There is another question of mine. Who orders these things?
So, yeah. So I got to see that. And it's not as fun as the ad would make you think. Final thing here. I mentioned it earlier. Here's the Daily Planet entry at the very, or the back of the issue. We got the direct currents for things that are on sale the week of December 17th, which includes House of Mystery 278, Legion of Superheroes 261, Sergeant Rock 338. So kind of on brand, on point for, and there's a couple other ones, but if in terms of the characters that are in here, the Hembeck strip here has Lois and Jimmy. Lois is saying, "Where's Perry? Jimmy, he quit the planet and ran off to Las Vegas to become a stand-up comedian." Lois, "Great Caesar's Palace." Jimmy, "I'll say."
That almost goes along with the outline.
I was going to say, about the same level of humor there, I think.
What was the headline? The headline said something about Scalp Hunter.
Scalp Hunter flees rebels. Yeah, this is it.
Wow.
Weird Western tales.
Yeah, putting Scalp Hunter right there at the top of direct currents.
Yeah. And then there's a ask the answer man.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just a couple of these. Why not revive Plop? Asks Holden.
Plop. Did you ever read Plop?
I think I've looked at a few issues of a very long time ago.
I picked a couple of those off the rack.
I meant to look this up because Bob answers it with, "There are no plans for the near future, but maybe someday." And I was kind of wondering, did they ever revive Plop? I kind of think not.
No, he was probably just trying to appease the guy.
There are a lot of questions. There's, 3 or 4 about how much is, X comic worth.
Oh.
One of the questions that's asked is, what is the most valuable comic in your personal collection?
Oh.
And Bob says, "I guess Fantastic Four #1.
I hate that guy.
Which I bought in 1961 for 10 cents and now catalogs, and this is 1979, for $900.
Bargain at any price.
I think it's worth a lot more than that, George.
I do too. Especially in these semi-post-COVID times.
All right. What is up next for your Christmas comics?
All right. Well, Supersized Alf Holiday Special was a very serious comic. I think we can all agree on that. It was a Marvel comic, and last year I did one Marvel, one DC, and one independent, kind of almost like in the geek speak old style. So having a Marvel comic, now I've decided to throw in a DC comic. Hot Wheels #6. Hot Wheels only ran 6 issues. So this is the 6th and final issue of the series. Hot Wheels being the toy cars that we would play with as kids, Matchbox, I guess, being their biggest rival.
Mm-hmm.
Although Corgi had those great superhero cars that were in that ad that you were talking about. This is cover dated January, February 1971, with a cover price of 15 cents. It hit the stands. I did do a little research on this one. It hit the stands on November 17th, 1970. Now, actually, just to remind you that Alf comic came out in 1990, well, winter 1990. So I guess it came out in 89, around the holidays, 1989. The cover is done by Neil Adams, the late, great Neil Adams.
I was wondering about that.
And it depicts one of the Hot Wheel characters helping a girl. You can see her legs in a splint. There's like a first aid kit that's like half on the page, half off the page. And a maniacal Santa Claus is in a Hot Wheels car that doubles as a sleigh because it's got those, I don't know what you call the things on the end of a sleigh that let it slide through the snow. And it looks like he's coming to attack them. Now, when I first saw this cover, though, I guess I didn't see the splint and the first aid kit, and I thought that Santa was interrupting a romantic rendezvous on this snow-covered peak. I don't know why my mind's going there, but if you look at it, you can't deny that it doesn't look like there's some hanky-panky going on this cover here.
Well, especially where the guy's hand is hovering over or near.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, but then I see the splint on her leg and the first aid kit. I'm like, okay, he's trying to help her out. But really, I mean, Neil Adams did put a little bit of an entendre in there, I think. All right, so now I'm going to go to my ever-present notes that I don't stick to. So I'm going to throw the names at you. Jack Wheeler, Kip Clark, Tank Mallory, Mickey Barnes, Janet, and Ardeth. These are the characters in Hot Wheels comics.
Okay.
Now, if there was an X-Men comic, you would already know Colossus, Cyclops, Wolverine. But here I feel it's necessary for me to at least tell you who the characters are because, again, only ran 6 issues. This is the 6th and final issue we're going to talk about here. And it's over 50 years old. Some people don't even realize there was a Hot Wheels comic. All right, so here we go. Into the book. There are 2 stories in here. And again, much to how I guess I pick comics. The first story is Christmas themed. The second story is not. So we're going to focus on the first story. The spirit of Christmas sifts softly through the air, filling everyone it touches with a feeling of brotherhood and charity that, sadly, is only felt this once each year. Yada, 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 yada. There's a lot of text here, just like in your book. But I love this. I could read just the captions, and I'd be having a lot of fun. But
well, George, who wrote this?
Oh, I was getting to that. This is a Len Wein written production.
I did not mention this, but in my DC special, all those stories were edited by Len Wein.
Oh, okay. See all the connections there.
Yes.
And you know something? You're making me want to dig that out. My collection is not anywhere near as organized as yours or Peter or most of the people who listen to your show. That issue is somewhere in this house. It'd probably be easier for me to just go buy it for $80, which I'm not going to do, but than me try to find it in this house. And I know that was one of Peter's on his show, the Daily Rios. If nobody listens, I don't know why you're not listening. He did mention something about organizing your collection being a New Year's resolution or something like that.
Yeah. And
here we are, 2023 is coming, and I haven't done diddly squat on that. Anyway, so sorry, Peter, if you're listening. This town of Maiden Valley doesn't specify the state. Around Christmas time, they invite all these kids from an orphanage to come and bask in the glow of their ski village, take advantage of the slopes and the spas, and it's just a week for the orphans to have some fun and forget about their troubles. In addition to that, there is what is called a gymkhana, which I had no idea what that was, and I had to look it up. And it's really just a motorsport race, basically trying to see who is the fastest on the court. And it's spelled gym, like going to the gymnasium, G-Y-M, Khana, K-H-A-N-A. I'd never heard the term before. I don't know anything about motorsports, but apparently it is a type of motorsport. And they use the term once or twice in this book. Our heroes, Jack and Kip, are driving on a course on the ice. And they are well ahead of the competition. But of course, a dog named Stinky has to run out on the course, making them veer off, hitting a bit of a divot in the ice, causing them to go butt over tea kettle and crash on the ice. And this is where we get a little bit of the great prose as the car is skidding and going into a turn. Images blur and spin before Jack's eyes, and the only sound that he can hear through the pounding is the roar and the thunder of Hot Wheels with the Hot Wheels logo in the Humbug Run, a midnight visitation by Dick Giordano, the ghost of Christmas past, Len Wein, the ghost of Christmas present, Neil Adams, the ghost of Christmas yet to be. Dunk, dunk, dunk. Dick Giordano did the inks. And he was the editor. So this is a Neil Adams drawn comic. Their car is destroyed. And because their car is destroyed, they can't go home for Christmas. So they're going to be stuck in this town for the holidays. So they try to make the most of it and they go skiing. I will say that the characters do look like they're drawn by Neil Adams, although Jack Wheeler looks like he could be a double for Johnny Quest sometimes.
Oh, I'm sorry. When you showed me the cover,
Uh-huh.
that's who I was thinking of.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You're thinking of Johnny Quest?
Yeah.
Yeah, so some of the profile shots or three-quarter shots, he looks like he could be Johnny Quest, like an older Johnny Quest. But the character of Tank is more exaggerated and more cartoony. He's got the really the Tick type of jawline,
Okay.
where the jaw's extended, overly extended, and he's got the big muscles. You could picture it in a cartoon. And in fact, I think there was a Hot Wheels cartoon.
Oh,
and
sure.
I'm guessing this is where all the characters come from. But Tank in particular looks like he comes straight out of a Saturday morning cartoon in this book, whereas the other ones have more of a Neil Adams-ish look to them. As they're skiing down the mountain, there's a little kid who's frozen in place like a deer in the headlights as an avalanche is coming down the mountain. So Jack Wheeler, our hero, goes to save the kid and, of course, gets him in the nick of time. But the kid is like an insolent brat, doesn't really appreciate that he was saved from an avalanche. And he says, get your hands off me, you pig, I'm out of here. And the other guys are like, whoa, talk about an ingrate. What the heck is that all about? So P.S., you go to the next day, fast forward to the next day, and the guys are fixing their car, and the kid runs across the parking lot to them and asks for their help. He's frantic. And he's saying, I'm being pursued by people with guns. They're after me. And nobody believes this kid. They're like, what do you, first of all, you're an ungrateful little pig, and you're asking us for help. We don't believe you. Why would people be chasing you with guns? And then sure enough, bullets start flying. So they take cover behind these oil cans and stuff. And who's shooting at them? Henchmen dressed as elves. And you could tell they're henchmen by the way Neil Adams draws them, like, oh, we're a bunch of mugs kind of thing. And, of course, Tank, being the big, brutish guy, he throws the I don't know what you call those cans. They look like gas cans, but they're not filled with gas cans. You see those, you see them all over racetracks on the side of a racetrack. But picture almost like a beer keg type of thing. So Tank starts throwing them at the elves, and of course the elves get hit with them. The guys jump in the car with the kid and are being pursued by the elves who are shooting at them. And our Hot Wheels drivers are, of course, experts at what they do because they're Hot Wheels guys. There's a snow blower that's cleaning up the road in front of them. And Jack drives the car really quickly past the snowblower, just missing being hit by the snow that's being dumped. But of course, the elves that are following them aren't so lucky, and their convertible car, they get covered in snow, and that's how the guys get rid of them. Or at least slow them down so that they don't catch up. Now, I see you thinking, have you been in a situation like this before, Eric?
No, because I wouldn't drive a convertible with a top down where there's snow.
Well, I mean, how else are you going to shoot everybody?
Well, I guess, I wouldn't be shooting anybody. So,
Yeah, I guess not. Yeah. There was a pop culture reference here that actually you may have known because considering when this was printed, but I had to look this up. When they're skiing down the slopes before they first meet the little kid, Tank is having trouble keeping steady on the skis, and one of their other buddies, Mickey, says, "That's our Tank, the Jean-Claude Killy of the Fender Bender set." Now, Jean-Claude Killy is an French alpine skier, Olympic medalist. I think he won all the alpine events in the '68 Olympics, which would make sense because this is a comic that came out in 1970. And at the time, the Winter Olympics and the Summer Olympics both occurred in the same year before they alternated in 2-year shifts in the 90s. So in '68, there would have been the Winter and the Summer Olympics. So in 1970, Jean-Claude Killy was probably still in the cultural zeitgeist. In fact, some kids who probably watched the Olympics knew who that was. So I thought that was a very interesting reference that wouldn't carry today. Considering, talk about references, when they're being chased by the elves and the elves get hit with all the snow as they're clearing the car and still in pursuit of our Hot Wheels heroes, one of the guys in the car says, "How are we doing, Hotshot?" And the other person answers, "Rotten. That fruitcake Farkle family is still on our tail." Now, do you get the Farkle family reference?
I don't.
The Farkle family are, and this is what I think they are, I can't think of any other reference. It would be Frank and Fanny Farkle of Laugh-In. They had the Goldie Hawn reference in a 1989 comic. Here, a little more current for the time.
Yeah.
That you make a Farkle family reference. Dan Rowan was Frank Farkle. I think Joanne Worley was Fanny Farkle. Maybe that changed over time. I don't think Joanne Worley was always Fanny Farkle. But anyway, it was the Farkle family, and because their name was a tongue twister, if I recall correctly, most of a sketch with that family was just a bunch of tongue twisters and trying to match up the name Farkle, like Sparkle Farkle, Arkle Farkle, just crazy things. Like it was really more a wordplay sketch than anything else when it happened. But I thought that was interesting to throw the Farkle family in the middle of a Hot Wheels comic. Turns out that the boy is a prince of some, I don't know, what do they call it? Calvania. I don't think Calvania is a real country, or it definitely wasn't a real country back then. And his father is on his deathbed. The son escaped from his chaperone, made his way to hide out in an orphanage. And it turns out that orphanage was the one that went to this town for the festivities for the holidays. And he has always been pursued by these people, and they're probably just dressed as elves to blend in with the holiday themes that are going on in the town. Turns out their big boss finds them, and he's dressed as Santa Claus.
Of course.
So Santa Claus comes in, toting his guns with the 4 goons dressed as elves that were chasing them down before. The fight ensues. You can almost think of almost like, I guess, maybe the Monkees, when the Monkees would get into a bind, and then there'd be that little montage with the Monkees music playing in the background, and then there'd be the fight with the bad guys or whatever. I kind of was thinking that as the caption box was kind of explaining all the action that was taking place with no dialogue going on, as the Hot Wheels guys were beating up the elves and Santa Claus. Turns out that after they subdue Santa and the elves, they find out that Santa couldn't have shot them even if he wanted to, because some kid put bubble gum in the gun. Ha 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 ha. So, disaster averted. The boy is with the Hot Wheels gang. They're going to send him back. Turns out his father is going to make a full recovery. The whole thing was Santa Claus was his uncle. And because the king was on his deathbed, he thought the king was going to die. The only heir was the kid. If he killed the kid, he would take the throne. So that's what this was all about. he escapes, and the kid escapes. He's going to go back home. His father's fine. The kid's a little upset because now he wants to hang out with the Hot Wheels gang, but they're like, you have to go back, but don't worry, we won't forget about you. Maybe there was an intention, if this series went on, to go back and meet the kid and be in his country. But lo and behold, the other cast members come to them, so they're not spending Christmas alone. It's Janet and Ardith, the two people I mentioned before, Jack Wheeler's dad, and the commissioner. There's always a commissioner. And they say, we couldn't let you spend Christmas alone. We're going to spend Christmas together. And at the end, in the little caption box with holly around it, it says, what more can we add? Season's greetings to all men everywhere, and above all, peace. All men everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And above all, peace. So that's the first story. Then there's a pinup, kind of like a pinup page with, it's like a stock car, the K3 Magnet. And then it tells you the history of the Magnet and how somebody who drove it won races with it. So it's like a pinup page. There was a follow-up story called Super Chick, where there's a race, and their Dick Dastardly character called Dexter Carter was going up against the Hot Wheels gang, and the Hot Wheels gang were taking a break after the practice, and what the race was it was a race on motorcycles with sidecars. So you had to have two people in the race, the motorcycle driver and the person in the sidecar. And the purpose of that was they were going so fast, the person in the sidecar would have to shift their body weight in order to prevent the motorcycle from tumbling over based on the speeds they were taking turns. Dexter Carter has some of his goons, and typical goons going, duh, and yeah, sure, boss, we'll get them for you. They kidnap Kip, who's going to be in the sidecar. And they're roughing him up, but Kip is a kind of like a Zen karate guy. So he gets away from them with a black eye, and he beat them up using his kung fu moves. But in the meantime, while he was doing that, one of the girls, Ardith, not knowing much about the Hot Wheels comic or the Hot Wheels gang, it seems like Ardith knows a lot about cars, but because she's a girl, she's looked down upon by the guys. So she says she'll fill in for Kip, be in the sidecar. So of course, Mickey driving the motorcycle is like, oh, okay, you're just a girl, you can't do that. Oh, okay, I'm stuck. I can't do anything else. And she does it, and her friend is telling her, you've got to be a little more feminine than she basically says that. That's all wrong, Ardith. You've got to be helpless and feminine if you want Mickey to dig you.
Oh, God.
Mm-hmm. And she helped him with a clogged carburetor or something like that. So she knows her way around cars, but she has to pretend she doesn't because she's a girl.
Mm-hmm. At least they were giving her some knowledge and experience, and not just wanting to be the girlfriend of one of the other characters.
Right. And she knew what to do. She knew how to shift her body weight to do exactly what Kip was supposed to do. And in the end, she saves the day, because Dexter Carter is just like Dick Dastardly in the Laugh Olympics. Mm-hmm. He's always cheating. So they get ahead of the Hot Wheels gang, and they're trying their best to catch up, but they're falling behind. And as they're getting really close, Ardith does something that makes she makes some funny faces to make the dumb henchman in the sidecar laugh. And because he's laughing so hard, he doesn't do the shifting with his body, which causes them to lose time, and the Hot Wheels gang cross the finish line first. And of course, that gets Mickey, the Hot Wheels guy's attention that, hey, you're not so bad after all, Ardith. Mm-hmm. You know your way around a car and a motorcycle. Kudos for you. In fact, it's that thing that makes him say to her, Ardith, you're beautiful. You turn me on. And the other girl's like, oh, I give up. I don't know how to, I don't know the weight of this guy's heart. I can't give Ardith guy advice anymore. Now, there was a direct current in here, and it's an old school direct current where there's text for all the comics that are coming out. I'm showing Eric the page here. I'm not going to read any of this stuff. But instead of just giving a little blurb for each of the comics that were coming out at the time, I mean, there's a nice paragraph for each of those. You see those, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's good stuff. But I'm not even really going to talk about the ads here, although there was an ad for a Snoopy Sopwith camel.
Oh, really?
Model. Yeah, right there on the front cover.
Huh.
But there's a 2-page ad for Superman, and I'm guessing it's Kurt Swan. I'm not sure. Yeah, it looks like Kurt Swan artwork. So there's a pinup page that says a new year brings a new beginning for Superman, and there's a pinup of Superman, and then there are some panels showing Superman advancing through the ages. Like first he really just jumped an eighth of a mile before he flew. His power set was different,
right?
And then it showed the how kryptonite has changed. Like it went from green kryptonite to a strange experiment has changed all green K on Earth to harmless iron, but it also created a new weakness, the exact nature of which even Superman doesn't know. But you can see what it is in the January issue of Superman, and I don't know what that was. This was Clark Kent when he originally started working for George Taylor, editor of the Daily Star. Time passed, and now Clark was working for Perry White, editor of the Daily Planet. This is Clark Kent, 1971, working for Morgan Edge, president of the Galaxy Broadcasting System. Now, I got to admit, I didn't know that happened so early. I didn't know that was a 1971, early 70s change.
I thought that was a 1980s thing.
Yeah, so it was as early as that.
Huh.
But what this ad is doing, after giving those little tidbits of Superman's history, very, very brief things that I guess they wanted to call attention to, like the kryptonite thing changing and how now Superman how Clark Kent works for a TV station as opposed to a newspaper. The last 4 or 5 panels there are other changes in the Superman family of magazines. Jimmy Olsen and the new Newsboy Legion, written and drawn by Jack Kirby. Rose and the Thorn, a new feature appearing in Lois Lane. Supergirl, a whole new look for the Maid of Might in Adventure Comics. Superman teams up with the Flash, Robin, Green Lantern, and others in World's Finest. Also, new Superman features in the current issues of Action Comics. The Legion of Superheroes in Superboy. Untold Tales of Krypton and Superman. So this was a 2-page ad letting you know that Superman was supposed to be the thing to watch in 1971. So it was pretty cool.
Not to mention, Superman was like Batman is today.
Yeah.
And so it pleases me greatly to hear you describe this for, what was it, 1971?
Right, exactly.
This
year.
book came out, yeah.
Well, it came out in 1970.
Oh, okay.
And this was promoting the brand new year, 1971. It was going to be big for Superman.
Yeah.
Apparently. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. Hot Wheels. I never read any other issue of Hot Wheels before. This one I picked up specifically because it was Christmas. It had a Christmas cover.
Yeah.
It's the only reason I even bought it.
Wait, did you get it specifically for our Christmas discussion, or was it something you picked up before that?
Perhaps. No, I only just bought it this year.
Oh, really? Okay.
I specifically bought it for our discussion. I wasn't lying when I said I start thinking about it. It's like the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. The parade ends, they have their Thanksgiving dinner, and they start planning the next one. Mm-hmm. I gave myself the week between Christmas and New Year's off, but then once January 1st came on, I was already thinking about our Christmas Gab Bag.
Very nice. Okay.
One of my favorite holiday traditions.
All right. Well, I don't know if this is tradition worthy, George. My next focus, the character, the book. This is a special one shot that came out December 22nd, 2010. And this is by Brett Booth, Jeff Johns, which might give you a clue as to what this is. Andrew Dahlhaus, Nick J. Napolitano. And with a Gene Ha cover. This is the Green Lantern Larfleeze Christmas special.
Ah, yes.
So I mentioned Emerald City Comic Con earlier for the first comic. I was at Emerald City Comic Con. I think the first one that I went to was in 2010. And so that would have been March, and this comic came out in December. And I was at the DC panel, and I remember Jeff Johns specifically talking about, or first mentioning, because that's, there was a time in which major announcements came out at Seattle, the Emerald City Comic Con, before things shifted and they started moving them to other other venues. But so Jeff Johns talked about the Larfleeze Christmas special, and I still remember the somewhat raucous and agreeable laughter in the room by the attendees. It's like, Larfleeze Christmas special? What does that mean? What is that all about, right? And I was a huge fan of the Green Lantern run during that time. Jeff Johns was piloting that, and we got great stories coming out of that, including Blackest Night. But here we have the Larfleeze Christmas special, titled "Aren't You Glad It's Christmas?"
Aren't you glad I didn't say Larfleeze?
Exactly. And just like with the DC special series, I have this epigraph here to share. Some questionable readers may tell you that Christmas has become nothing but a crass, commercialized, capitalist concoction.
Love it.
More alliteration. I love it.
Yeah.
And to that, I argue invariably every holiday season. But perhaps what Christmas needs is a fresh pair of eyes to sense the magic of this winter festival. So let's take a trip through the holiday season with a creature of unquenchable avarice. Traveling from far across the universe to Earth, the Orange Lantern, known as Larfleeze, has discovered the existence of a powerful being who bestows gifts to everyone on December 25th. Making Earth his new home, Larfleeze eagerly has counted down the moments to Christmas morning, when he'll get all he's put on his list from the all-powerful and all-seeing guardian known as Santa Claus. So that's the setup. Basically, the story is he wakes up Christmas Day to discover that he has no gifts that he's requested from Santa Claus, so they must be stolen.
Oh, no.
They must be stolen, right? So he's investigating. He determines, in his brilliantly deductive way, that
Larfleeze
way, that Santa Claus has reneged on their compact, i.e., I write things on a list, you give them to me. And so he happens to see Santa Claus on a Christmas Day parade on the television, and of course heads off to confront the elf. When he finds that first Santa in the parade isn't the real Santa, he sees another one and chases that one into a building and discovers many of them, because they're all area Santa Clauses, or part of the parade or whatever. And he's quite confused and demanding to know where's the real Santa Claus. A kid, I don't know why this kid's around, but he is, tells him that the real Santa lives in the North Pole, and away he goes. Of course, he doesn't find Santa in the North Pole, because Santa's magic and can hide from weird alien Larfleezes, right? Mm-hmm. Right, kids? But Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, arrives to explain the Christmas spirit to Larfleeze. Oh. To better illustrate this point, Green Lantern takes Larfleeze's hoard, his accumulated stuff, because that's his thing. He takes and redistributes what he can to the children, not in the North Pole. They're now somewhere else, of course. Larfleeze still doesn't understand the Christmas spirit, and why would you give back the stuff that I have? What? But so Green Lantern tells him, look at your Christmas list and ask yourself, do I really need it? And then flies away in a huff because Larfleeze just isn't getting it. However, the issue ends with Larfleeze reviewing the list, stopping on one entry. And it's underlined, I think it's near the bottom of his list, and it simply says, my family. Mm. And so, in case you don't know, which I don't know. I actually didn't know the history of Larfleeze either. He was taken from his family when he was younger and enslaved. I don't know by whom, but
Is that part of the book though? Like, do they say this in the book?
no, not in this. It was in other stories.
Yeah.
Before becoming Agent Orange, the Orange Lantern. One of Larfleeze's companions. So you know how all of the other colored lanterns are comprised of all these different people, right? Or aliens or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Larfleeze is the only Orange Lantern because you can only have one. Because if there's others, you have to share. Larfleeze doesn't share. But what he does is he creates orange light constructs. And one of those is named Glomulus. And so Glomulus is a frequent companion of Larfleeze. And he actually appears in the story early on, but Larfleeze basically tells him to go away or whatever, shoos him off. Well, come to find out, at the very end of this issue, we get a wonderful, just a few pages, just 2 pages done by Art Baltazar and Franco, if you're familiar with their work.
Sure.
They did Tiny Titans and some other things that I'm forgetting at the moment.
The one piece of artwork I bought this year is a Franco Dazzler.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You have to show me that. Did you post that on your social media?
I think I did, but I would gladly show it.
I'll have to look that up. Anyway.
Yeah.
So what we get to hear is the story, Where Did Glomulus Go? And it's, like I said, it's a 2-page thing. It's more or less a gag. He goes to the various other lantern corps, searching for something orange, to give to Larfleeze.
Yeah.
He goes to Sinestro, Sinestro doesn't have anything orange and tries to scare him because that's what the Yellow Lanterns are all about, fear. Anyway, he gets annoyed with Glomulus, and to shoo him away, he's like, give him some candy, butterscotch. I don't like those, so he's got an orange candy, right? He goes to the Blue Lanterns and steals a bluebird of hopefulness, and everybody's like, I hope he treats him well. Goes to the I think it's pronounced Ismalt, the Red Lantern planet.
Oh boy!
And what's his? I've forgotten his name. Whoever the Red Lantern is, and doesn't have anything orange, but he does give Glomulus a fruitcake with orange in it.
There you go.
Goes to Zamaron with the Star Sapphires, and they're all loving each other and expressing their love for each other, and that manifests itself as sapphire hearts, purple hearts, right? So he grabs one of those and takes it, and then he goes to the Indigo Lanterns, and apparently they have an Indigo Girls, spelled Gurlz, CD, Indigo Girls. So he takes that and then brings all that stuff back to Larfleeze. So I just thought that was cute. And okay, you think that's a pretty good Christmas issue, right? One shot, not too long of a story. You got that nice little thing at the end, like I just described. No, George, there's more here.
Oh, okay.
There's more. There is there are 3 items in here interspersed throughout the story. One is the Larfleeze's Orange Lantern cookies. It's a recipe, George.
Oh, no way. A real recipe.
An actual recipe. I've not made it. I've been meaning to do that for like the last year or so to see if they actually work. But I'm not a big fan of orange flavored things, so.
Well, you know who could make that really well, I'll bet you.
Huh.
Friend of both our shows, artist, writer Greg Schiegel.
Oh, of course.
He's the bacon champion.
Okay.
When it comes to the comic book world.
I'm going to have to send this to him and ask him if he's ever done this. I will say another reason why I don't want to make this, although I could obviously cut the recipe in half, but it says at the bottom, makes approximately 2 dozen cookies or 1 serving if you're Larfleeze.
But by the way, when Glomulus is his name, right? When Glomulus do we see him actually giving all those gifts to Larfleeze? And what does Larfleeze do?
Oh, sorry. I should have.
Does he appreciate it? I don't know what's in his.
He says, Glom, look at all the stuff you got me. Oh, he talks about the bluebird of hopefulness. Glomulus painted it orange.
Okay, I was going to say how does that fit into orange? But okay.
Yeah. So everything not everything is orange, but for some reason he painted the blue bird orange. So he says, but this orange bird is awesome, and the paint's still wet. Thanks, Galam.
Oh, good. Okay, so you appreciate it.
He did, yeah. So maybe he actually did learn something from Green Lantern.
His heart grew 3 sizes that day.
One of the other things in here is a help Larfleeze get to the North Pole, and it's one of those mazes.
Oh, I love puzzle pages.
Yeah. Yeah. It's got a Yeti chasing him at one point. Oh, he sees he encounters Superman's Fortress of Solitude, chased again by the white bears. They're called
polar bears.
Polar bears, thank you.
No problem.
Oh, he's also chased by, apparently he went to the wrong pole. Oh yeah, he went to the South Pole but by accident and is chased by penguins.
Okay.
Anyway. And then finally, the final gag page thingy. Oh yes, is if you cut out this from the page, you can make your own Larfleeze Christmas ornament.
That's something that might be worth photocopying on a color copy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what's kind of funny about this is that this is a triangular shape that you then fold into a pyramid design. Yeah. Well, there are tabs on here where you would attach glue to put it all together. And the tabs actually say, "I want glue."
I want glue.
Yeah. Larfleeze can be pretty one note in the regular stories. I found this whole issue quite charming for all these reasons, all the entries in here that we have for this one shot. So I quite enjoyed that one.
Yeah, that was a fun one, and it's such a novelty. And like you said, that the crowd reaction at the panel, Larfleeze Christmas, what?
Yeah.
And here it sounds like it was a really good issue. Before I get on to my third book, I think I should just let you know I was remiss. I didn't tell you who the creative team was for that second story in the Hot Wheels comic.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Well, there are no credits for that. So I looked it up on the DC fandom site to see if it would say anything. And the only thing it said was who the artist was. And the artist was Rick Estrada.
Oh, okay.
From Super Friends fame. Mm-hmm. From what I saw, he also did work. He was a consultant for the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe cartoon, among other comics that he had worked on. So anyway, I wanted to at least give that little credit there. It's the only one. I don't know why. I guess DC didn't keep good records back then. So even on DC fandom, they don't have that. Okay. I forget which year you did you brought an illustrated classics to the table, and it was A Christmas Carol.
I think that was 2020.
Oh, okay. The last time we were together for this purpose. And I don't know, maybe some other comics that we've discussed have been homages to A Christmas Carol. Because let's face it, who doesn't try to do A Christmas Carol, right?
That's right.
Well, I have a comic here from a company called Airwave Comics. It came out going back to my notes here, all my notes. You hear, folks, I actually took notes that I don't read. It came out in 2003, but it is the comic book adaptation of a Christmas special from 1962. So I find it very weird that in 2003, this company called Airwave Comics put out the comic book adaptation of the 1962 classic, Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol. Okay, even today, especially with the way streaming is and the rights of things, do you think anybody under the age of 30 knows who Mr. Magoo even is?
No.
I don't either.
Yeah.
And in 2003, it might have been questionable because this special, as the 2000s rolled on, as far as I know, I didn't see this in syndication around the holidays even 20 years ago, the way I used to see it when I was a kid or when I was in my 20s or even my 30s. But this is the comic book version of A Christmas Carol. And if anybody has seen the special, Mr. Magoo plays Ebenezer Scrooge. I don't think any particular characters from his cartoon show played any of the other characters. I think they just created a Bob Cratchit, a Tiny Tim, and then of course the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and yet to be, and Jacob Marley, of course. And speaking of Greg Schiegel before, Greg used to do a lot of work for SpongeBob comics and for SpongeBob merchandise, and you couldn't necessarily tell the difference between anything Greg did and what the cartoon looked like.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
When you have some of these licensed things, you really do have to adhere to the model sheets. So Greg could appreciate that. I mean, this is basically taken from the cells. It wasn't, but I mean, whoever drew this, and again, there are really no credits here, but I mean, it looks like a Mr. Magoo cartoon. And I mean, we all know the story of A Christmas Carol, so I'm not going to go through it. But again, Mr. Magoo plays Scrooge, and one of the parts of the special that has been left out is Scrooge's interactions with his nephew. His nephew doesn't appear in the comic at all, so that whole bit is out. That he meets his nephew, then he goes to eat with the nephew, but everything else is in there. He gets visited by the ghosts. In my head, I can hear some of the songs where they should be in the special while I was reading the comic. One of my favorite lines that I still say to this day, even in the middle of July, I'll go, and razzleberry dressing, which don't ask me why. But they didn't have a razzleberry dressing line in here because I don't think that was part of A Christmas Carol. I think that was just part of a song that they put into the show. That Tiny Tim sings that line. But in doing some of my research, because I was a little curious about this, I was like, Airwave Comics, I'm really not very familiar with them. When I looked this up, I found another Mr. Magoo Christmas Carol compilation from Airwave Comics. And it looks like it's a trade paperback as opposed to being a comic. And by the way, this comic from 2003 was cover priced $4.95. Apparently, there is a bigger compilation of this with deleted scenes, which makes me wonder, do they throw in the nephew? I'm trying to think of what deleted scenes are in there. So I'm guessing maybe they added the part with his interactions with his nephew. And maybe they expanded on some of the interactions with the ghosts, because it's a very short comic. I mean, the interaction in the past and the present especially could have had a little more meat on it. But you only have so many pages in a comic book, so they had to leave some stuff out. So I find it very interesting that there's another version of this out there by the same company with quote deleted scenes and I think some other things in there, maybe some essays or whatever. I'd be very interested in finding that. I mean, I could probably purchase it on the internet, but I'd rather seek it out in the wild.
Yeah.
If I ever see it, it's one of those things I'll pick up. Another thing about Airwave Comics, some of the titles I didn't recognize, but Alan Moore did some work for them. But what I found really, really interesting is another TV show that they adapted to comics. I don't know for how many issues, but they did I Dream of Jeannie. And again, for something to come out in the early 2000s, I Dream of Jeannie.
Right.
It's fun to have that license. But again, I'm trying to think, they'd definitely be marketing to us. I can't imagine a 16-year-old or 12-year-old, although I Dream of Jeannie, maybe you don't need to know it as long as you know that it's a genie. The master doesn't want the genie to use her powers or whatever. And I don't know, he's an astronaut. I mean, maybe it's just fun. You don't have to know the TV show. But I found that was a very interesting other licensing thing that this company had at that time. Oh, and they left out the speech in A Christmas Carol. I forget the exact words, but basically the holidays are just another reason to pick your pocket. Mm-hmm. That speech was totally left out of this, but I mean, I know it's in the special, so that's probably something else that's in the in this larger edition that appears out there. I do need to point out, and I'm not going to go into detail about it, much detail, but this is a flip book. The cover is actually done by Bill Morrison from Simpsons comics fame. But if you flip it over, it says Mr. Magoo Holiday Special with a cover done by Owsley. Now, I don't think it's Jim Owsley, but it says Owsley at the bottom, and it's Mr. Magoo at a ticket counter, and they're celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Wright brothers' first flight. Because remember, this was 2003 this came out. And Mr. Magoo, because he is nearsighted, I think he's nearsighted, instead of handing the money to the woman at the ticket counter, he's handing the money to the poster of the Wright brothers, telling them he needs one ticket to go to the exhibit. Not only is there maybe a 6 or 8 page adventure here, but it's a color it yourself adventure. It's a black and white. It's like a coloring book. So if you were a kid and you wanted to color this in, you could. It's just line drawing. And it's Mr. Magoo going to an exhibition about the Wright brothers. Somebody created a replica of the plane. And of course, Mr. Magoo gets mistaken for an elderly pilot. He thinks he's in a restaurant. He thinks he's being seated at a restaurant. The woman running the thing thinks he's the guest of honor pilot. She puts him into the plane for the photo op. He hits a button and the plane takes off. Hilarity ensues. His nephew Waldo, who is part of the cartoon, is in this issue. Is in this story. Is pretty fun. And the title panel, it's not a title page. The title panel has him in the car yelling Roadhog, which he does at the beginning of his cartoon. I don't know if you remember how his cartoon began. He's driving and he's the one causing all the road problems, and he'd yell Roadhog. So I thought that was kind of cool that they threw that into the book. And you know how you were mentioning, it's interesting, like Frank Miller did work in that holiday special.
Mm-hmm.
This script is by Michael Urie.
No kidding.
From Back Issue magazine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you never know whose name you're going to find in these things. But anyway, that was Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol Holiday Special, which is a flip book with Mr. Magoo's Holiday Special, which is really a color-it-yourself adventure celebrating 100 years of flight from the Wright brothers. That was a fun one.
That's so funny because when we first planned to do this Gab Bag last year,
mm-hmm.
and I kept with the same books that I had chosen for that discussion. I know you, because you had talked about the ones you chose last year on your solo episode. So you had to choose some new comics for our talk, right? I also had chosen a Christmas Carol a Christmas Carol adaptation. Only not as interesting as Mr. Magoo, because my choice was Batman Noël. And this was published November 2nd, 2011 by Lee Bermejo.
Wait, hold on. Okay. Now, Eric, really, come on. Now, I picked cultural icons that everybody around the world knows. Alf, Hot Wheels, and Mr. Magoo. And you picked this obscure character in the show called what now? I mean, come on, Eric.
I know, right?
Please, do your homework.
Well, so the reason I wanted to choose, like I said, Lee Bermejo did the story and the art. So it's his baby. Barbara Chardo was the colorist, Todd Klein letters. I knew about this book, George. I knew about it back in 2011-ish when it was being published. I was not aware that it was a retelling of A Christmas Carol starring Batman and friends. I just thought it was a Batman story set during Christmas. Had no idea. And so January 2021 is when I discovered it was a Christmas Carol adaptation, because I was listening to the Comic Source podcast, and they were spotlighting this limited, was it limited series, or can't remember if it was issues or if it's all one thing.
I thought it was a graphic novel. I could be wrong, but that's what I thought.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, graphic novel. Anyway, so I was like, well, here it is, January 2021, and I'm like, well, I have to read this. It's a Christmas Carol, so I have to read it, right? So I I bought it digitally. I bought it from Comixology, and then read it. I'm like, oh, I definitely need to add this to the to the list to talk with George about it, because it was, it's Bermejo, and he just draws things so well.
Mm-hmm.
Although I will say his take on Batman, I don't know if you're familiar with Bermejo's Batman, but he draws everything, the costume, the gadgets, they're all so very realistic looking. So this is a Batman who's wearing basically leather armor, and you can practically feel the weight of what he's wearing as he's jumping around and fighting and doing stuff in the panels. It's just, it's amazing how much energy that Bermejo is able to impart, given that Batman kind of looks bulky in all this lightweight armor that he's wearing. So it's a beautifully drawn story. Like I said, it's a Christmas Carol, but with Batman as Scrooge. A dead Robin, whom I assume is Jason Todd, although the way it was presented, I wasn't quite sure if that was really supposed to be Jason, as Marley. And then filling out the other ghosts' roles are Catwoman as the Ghost of Christmas Past, but she's also the love interest as well. Superman as the Ghost of Christmas Present. And I have to say, there's the scene where the two are interacting. The way that Bermejo and Chardo drew Superman, or portrayed Superman, he's literally, he's the sun god of the DC universe, right? He's literally glowing on the page in the scenes with Batman. So that, just the idea of the Ghost of Christmas Present, as we see him in various film adaptations, there's usually a light emanating from him. It's about the light dispelling the darkness of winter and all that kind of stuff, right? And they do that really well with Superman's portrayal in this.
I'm reminded, sorry to interrupt, but I'm reminded of that in the Mr. Magoo Christmas Carol, only because the Ghost of Christmas Present, the ghost has a flame over their head as if they're a candle. And as their time together is running out, she says, "Oh, our time is limited." And you could see throughout that the flame is getting smaller and smaller, which I think is portrayed in other, versions that we've seen in other media. But that was a thing from the cartoon that was put into the book.
Oh.
So did Superman's light never?
No.
Like the aura never faded, right?
No, not really. Not that I recall, anyway.
Yeah, that might have just been a device that they used in the cartoon.
That's a really neat way to depict that. That's cool. I like that.
Yeah, I totally forgot about it until I read in the comic.
And then, like I said, the last ghost here is the Joker playing the Ghost of Christmas yet to come. It was, like I said, the art is gorgeous. It's cinematic. It's like I said, you get that realism that Bermejo throws in there, and then, but then you get it balanced out by the wonderful colors that Barbara Ciardo does. Like I said, the art's wonderful, but the story just doesn't really work. I mean, the mental gymnastics that I think Bermejo was trying to do to adapt Batman and his cast of characters to Dickens' A Christmas Carol doesn't quite work. And it's really stretching it a little bit. But I mean, the basic premise is there, right? Batman is learning something. And in
You're
the
already
end,
making me think of a choice for a Gab Bag next year. By the way.
good. In the end, Batman, of course, decides to change his ways and approach things a little differently, which I guess is the moral of the story. So anyway, I liked it. You even get a little bit of It's a Wonderful Life, how things would be if I hadn't lived a moment in the story. So, you get that connection too. So yeah, it was nice. Oh, and then I just also want to point out, in case people pick this up, who haven't read it, but there is the scene where Superman leaves and Batman is going to get into the Batmobile, and he hits the key or whatever to get in or to start the car. I forget which. Anyway, he presses a button and the Batmobile explodes, knocking him down and out. And so the bottom of the page shows him on the ground, but it fades to black. On the very next page, he's coming out of the darkness, coming awake, and he's being dragged by the Joker. And I just love that transition between those two moments and those two pages in the way that Bermejo drew that and did the page turn. So that was really, he's really good at visually telling or creating a scene. The overall story, maybe not as much. It didn't quite work as well. So
I'm trying to remember. There was no scene for scene thing about getting the turkey for Bob Cratchit part. Was there some?
There.
I'm trying to think of what that was. I don't
sort of.
It
wasn't a turkey, but right. It was basically Bruce Wayne offering Bob a job and helping out his son Tim. So like I said, you get the major beats.
Right.
To the story.
I forgot how he had done that part. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's try to remember.
Anyway, so
it's a
it
Christmas
was fun.
Carol. You really can't screw it up that much.
Well, I don't know. Your mileage may vary on that, but
so that was fun. That was a good jaunt down memory lane. I love it.
Yeah, so that's
another Gab Bag.
That's our Gab Bag. Yeah. So it only took a year longer than we anticipated, but
it's a good fireside marathon.
That's right. As your what's to the grandmother's house we go over the river and through, as you're going over the river and through the woods to Granny's house or wherever for the Christmas holiday, you have some Gab Bag to help you pass the time. Well, since we're on that topic, George, I just wanted to say to you and to the listeners, happy holidays and happy New Year, and I hope everybody has a great holiday season and a wonderful New Year coming up, because things have been not great the last few years. So you can only hope that things can only get better, right?
That's right, and especially this time of year is filled with hope and Christmas comics. That's
right. Well, all you need are comics.
Yeah,
that's my motto.
And I would like to say to you, Eric, happy birthday.
Oh, happy birthday to you too as well, George.
Thank you very much. We are both December birthdays. And
that's right.
When this show posts, our birthdays will be right there around the corner.
That's true.
Enjoy your birthday along with your holiday.
Yeah, thank you very much. All righty. Well, that's another Gab Bag in the bag, I guess. I don't
know. Another Gab Bag in the Gab Bag?
Yeah. Thanks for coming back, like I said, a year later, George, and regaling us with those Christmas comics. And look forward to what we could do next year.
Same here. Like I said, you already put one thought in my head.
All right. Before we let the fine listeners go to their Christmas parties and gatherings or whatnot, do you want to remind people about Meanwhile the podcast and where they can find you if they want to talk to you more about the comics you discussed or anything else pop culture related?
Yes. I am the co-host, one of four, of what I consider a very fun podcast about pop culture, slice of life type of topics, hopefully some things you can relate to. It is called Meanwhile the Podcast. We post a new show every Saturday morning. We'd like you to subscribe. We love you to use the hashtag live tweet while you're listening, because if you wanted to interject, because we would love to have you in on a conversation, but we can only... We don't do any live things, so the only way to live do it is while you're listening and you go, George, you were wrong about that. Live tweet it and let me know what I was wrong about. Let me know what you agree with me on, and let me know, hey, you know what? I didn't even think about that darn Alf holiday special. I'm going to go back and I'm going to dig it out. Hashtag live tweet. We're at Meanwhile at the Podcast on Twitter. And I'm not even going to mention the other ones because as of right now, we don't really go to them. But we're still on Twitter. Check us out. And we're Meanwhile ATP on Twitter. And Meanwhile at the Podcast is your next favorite podcast of 2023.
Alrighty. If anybody wants to send me feedback, it's longboxreview at gmail.com. I have a voicemail / text number people can communicate to me at 208-953-1841. I'm on the socials, as they say, at Longbox Review everywhere, and or you can just visit the website, longboxreview.com. And with that, George, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Listeners, thank you so much, and I will talk to you next year.